Who do you want to be your neighbor? Does it matter that they have few skills? Does it matter whether or not they vote? Does it matter that they have a good education? Education matters.
This program explores the state of education and its impact on democracy. Wes McClellan and Christine Barnes are co-authors of Education Matters: How to Save Our Democracy. McClellan and Barnes are retired school administrators with over 70 years combined experience. Wes and Christine, what is the connection between democracy and education?
Protecting our way of life has to include teaching our children about democracy as well as education. Democracies thrive because their citizens are involved in the democracy.
And we have to teach our students how to be active citizens in the process of our education programs in schools. When you teach children about democracy, you have to teach the ability to analyze, to look at media critically, to be able to synthesize information, speak the truth, ask questions, never take anything for granted. Find the source of the truth within the information that is being delivered to you so you can act on it.
Education and an educated public is not a new idea. It goes all the way back to Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson's the one who made sure that children in all villages and communities throughout this early developing nation had access to public education from the start. That was a real foundation for us as a country.
How is the average citizen disconnected from his or her school system?
I think the disconnect is represented in part by the lack of active participation on the part of citizens in our communities toward our schools. There's an apathy. If you don't have a child in the school system, there may not be a purpose that you perceive for being a part or knowing what's going on in the schools.
In many cases, the only connection there is to the schools are taxes. And people don't necessarily like paying taxes for something they don't know what's going on, but oftentimes they don't. Parents are very interested in what happens in schools, but parents are only a small portion of the voting public.
There needs to be a sense of community responsibility for the well-being of our schools. Everyone needs to be involved, not just the parents. It's everyone's collective responsibility to make our school system strong.
But people feel, though, when they pay taxes, they have a say, and parents are only a small portion of the population. So if you don't have anybody involved in the school establishment, the only connection you have are taxes. And if you don't like paying high taxes, that's why we lack the interest in what's going on in schools.
How do schools empower students to be effective citizens in a democratic nation?
One of the most effective ways we have learned in education is teaching children how to learn. For the longest time, we spent having children memorize and feedback and test, but we have since realized that we have to teach them how to learn as opposed to just what to learn. And the other key point is that children have to have equal access to resources. You can't have one school district having kids taking swimming in their swimming pool and other kids in other districts having no books to work with.
So important. And schools also need to teach information and content that is relevant. It doesn't make any sense to do a chemistry class where you're testing water quality if you don't use the data to further the information for baseline information about river quality in a community that is challenged by a water treatment center up the road. That's a baseline the kids can have a part in, being able to help the community understand what needs to be done to keep their water safe.
Interesting you say that, because one of the things we have found over the years that we tend to treat children as a liability as opposed to an asset. Liability costs money, and back to the resources, everybody should have the equal resources. That has to be funded by the taxpayer and the public. So therefore, having children have equal access to resources can make a difference as far as whether they're going to be successful or not.
We all have a responsibility in our community for a give and take, and children would not be seen as a liability if they were perceived as being contributors to the welfare of the community. It's everybody's responsibility to be involved in the education process and to share the information as important as it flows out of the schools.
And share the resources.
And the resources. Huge part.
What are some of the things that schools do to get in the way of children learning?
I think some of the things that get in the way of children learning is that the content is not always relevant. There are huge inequities in schools as well. Mentioned earlier, there often are not funds enough to buy books or buy the proper kinds of trained educators to teach students in certain capacities. Sometimes there's not enough money or resources to buy current technology, so the methodology is underdeveloped or not contemporary.
And the other phase or part of it is politics in schools and out of school. Politics in school, from my read on it, is oftentimes what happens is the needs, not even needs, the wants of the adults get taken care of first. And if, by the way, children's needs are taken care of, that comes secondarily. It's unfortunate, but I think it happens a lot in schools. The other part of politics on the outside of schools are people who run for school boards. People who run for school boards, some are community-minded and are doing it because they're really interested in making the community better. Others are in there to see what they can get for their own children. And it doesn't take long for you to watch a school board member see what side of the coin they're on, one for their children or for all of the children.
How has parenting changed over the years?
It's really tough being a kid nowadays, and tough for the parents. All the issues that they have to deal with, it seemed like some of the issues used to be just when they got into high school, but now it's in middle school and elementary. There's the whole issue of drugs, there's a whole issue of belonging, the whole issue of mental health. There's so many things that parents and kids have to deal with. It really is tough being a kid. And it's really tough being a parent too, because parents, I don't fault parents for their upbringing of children. I feel badly for them that they don't know who to turn to. Oftentimes they don't know even what the right questions are, and they oftentimes turn to the schools. But that's a sad part of being a parent nowadays, is that there's so many issues that kids have to deal with, so many issues that they have to deal with, and they really don't have a resource to go and turn to.
That speaks to the absence of community agencies able to help parents in need and help families in need. There's a problem with our connection with our community agencies and the support system that I think parents perceive available to them. Churches aren't as highly functioning as they were in terms of family support, as well as they used to be anyway. And the economy has been a huge drain on parents and put a huge stress on every family, to the point that parents are engaged in work. Both are working all the time and come home to try to put a family back together at the end of a long day. It's very difficult.
I think schools should make it more accessible for parents to come in and be involved. And I also have to tell you my pet peeve, there is a thin line between involvement and interference. Sometimes you can mislead people to think that because you want them to be involved, they can come in and call the shots. But it is necessary that schools reach out to parents and say, here's how we can help you, as opposed to trying to keep them out and keep it a big secret about what goes on in schools.
It needs to be a partnership.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Exactly.
In what ways have these changes affected children?
I think that when parents perceive themselves as a partner in a school, it is very helpful on behalf of the child. It's not always clear to a teacher that a child is hungry, or that there are distractions at home, or that the parents are having a huge struggle financially, but the behavior is present. So when a school teacher and a parent get together, it is very helpful to have a mutual agreement that the questions are gentle, that the information is elicited in a very calm and supportive manner on behalf of the child, not that it's angry and aggressive, but rather that there is a partnership in the process of working on behalf of the child. Very important.
Well, you mentioned earlier about a partnership, and it has to be a partnership because right now the schools are doing so many things that they never used to do before. They teach young children how to drive. They provide breakfast, they provide lunches, they provide immunization shots, they keep a nurse on staff all the time. They deal with bullying and cyberbullying, kids coming to school upset because they got emails the night before, which has nothing to do with the school in some sense, but it has something to do with the school. So the partnership with the community agencies is so key, and parents as well. It has to be a partnership for all of the things that we're asking schools to do.
And you know what? It comes back to that same thing again. It's a shared responsibility for the well-being of the child that creates a good citizen in our community.
Well, not to be corny, but I mean, it takes a village to raise a child.
It does.
I mean, it can't just be the parents, it can't just be the schools.
That's great. Absolutely.
What should schools do to address these issues?
One of the approaches that we have used in some of the schools is to have a community forum, a forum which engages staff members, community members, parents, students, and anybody with a vested interest in what is going on in the school. It's held at least twice a year, and it opens the dialogue among community members so that they and the staff, so that it's a check-in for the school. How are we doing with what we're trying to do in education in our school? What changes do we need to make in our direction? Is this functioning? Is this working? And postgraduate students who've been through our school system who are now entering the workforce have a lot to say about what worked for them and what didn't work for them in our school system. They are an untapped resource that we need to be looking at in terms of feedback. What attributes of your favorite teacher really worked for you? Why was that powerful? Why did the learning happen there and not in other places for you? What didn't we do that has created a real drag for you in your ability to become an active citizen in our democracy?
So that's an assessment of their experience with that school.
Very important. And it's an assessment on the part of community members and staff members and everybody else in partnership again with each other to make the school a better place.
On the way to raising mature young adults, how do we make sure to protect the process of normal child development?
We need to teach children to be responsible. But one of the biggest faux pas, I think, is made in this society is that we introduce children to issues before they're ready, or we introduce subject matter before they're ready. And I think the biggest improvement we could make in schools overall is that the adults become more aware of child development stages, because kids can't handle some things. And in particular, when we get into some of the social issues that impact, a lot of kids are going through tough situations with divorce, and parents end up becoming their friend, which a child does not need a friend as a mother or a father. The child needs somebody who cares, and not necessarily somebody who's going to befriend them. So you teach responsibility, age appropriate.
Excellent. And that is an important thing to be mindful of in schools, is those stages of development. Childhood is a journey. It's not a race.
Christine, what can people find in your Kindle book, Education Matters: How to Save Our Democracy?
In addition to the content we have just covered in this interview, Education Matters also includes information about schools, governance, teachers and teaching, content in the classroom, and other matters of interest. It also includes our perspective of what we as citizens in our communities might do to help improve our schools.
Wes, what can citizens, parents, educators, and students do?
Help bring change to your school by leading in a constructive manner. It doesn't matter whether you're a teacher, a staff member, a parent, a guardian, a community member, or a group of students. If you have a vision of what could be, perhaps inspired by some of the opportunities for change included in this book, then go forward. Your country, our country, is depending on you.
Education Matters: How to Save Our Democracy is only available for Amazon Kindle. Go to Amazon.com and search for Education Matters: How to Save Our Democracy.